Hello. Today I'm going to be talking about pretty much anything I can on the scripting language Insitux. So that will be the features, any projects, any drawbacks, where it can run, where it's supported, etc. It's very crude. As you can see, I'm not doing any video editing and I don't actually have a script. I just want to get this video done and I'll try and keep it within 20 minutes. I've got my eye on the clock. So Insitux is a portable TypeScript scripting language. So it is written itself in TypeScript, but it's fairly portable. It can be integrated into Roblox games. So any Roblox developers can, I hope, quite easily install it into their Roblox games and allow players to interact with your game in a safe way. It runs on Node.js, so just the ix command and you immediately get a REPL, or you can open particular files and search corpus. There we go. That's a Discord bot being run on Node.js, so it wasn't going to be very fantastic. And it also runs in the browser, as you can see here, of course. There's a full REPL, which does have syntax highlighting if you've already entered it. I might add it while you're typing later. So I suppose I'll just go through the features and then any projects. I'll just go down this page and then look at any particular syntax. I don't want to say quirks, any nice syntax that I really like to show off. So the features are, it has an extensible interface. So it is meant to be extended by yourself. For example, the REPL on Node.js is extended in this way. You just provide external functions, read lines, write, file append, prompt. Import is itself even sort of added in. So you can just install the NPM package and pretty much integrate it wherever you'd like. And of course, the Roblox one has its own Roblox TS NPM package. It has clear error messages. So I haven't necessarily chosen to not include stack traces, but at the moment it doesn't have stack traces. So here we go. This is as complicated as the errors get. You get the line, a little highlighting to say where in the line it happened, and of course what the error was, and saying whatever it is. So map type errors, argument 2 must be the string vector dictionary, not number. So excuse me. So it's very simple error messages. Hopefully it's not like even something like Python where you get 5 lines of error message. When you do start having errors in files, so if I put an error in the file somewhere here, I'll just do the same thing here, just using the plus. It does get a bit more complicated. It will say the line. I actually turned off syntax highlighting because I was using this for some console stuff. I think you can turn it back on. Sorry, not syntax highlighting of errors. But it's the same thing, and it just says, yeah, this is where it is. I could make it more complicated. I may in the future, adding stack traces and stuff. But right now, it's quite simple. First-class functions. So in another programming language such as JavaScript, you can just say const f, take a and add 1 to it. Okay, so now I have a function f, and I can give it 10, it will give me 11. But the idea of first-class, the idea of first-class functions is that is a variable. I have a function in a variable. I can pass it around. I can pass it as a parameter to a function, or I can return a function from a function, and you can do the same in Insitux as well. So let's say, I don't like using the word factory, but we could say like adder factory, and it's going to add the number n, and then we just return a function which takes, x, I suppose, and then adds n to x, right? Unmatched parenthesis, there you go, very simple stuff there. Go away. Very simple stuff there. Adder factory. Please give me a function that adds 10, and then of course I could use that. Go on, let's finish it off, shall we? Adder factory. There, gives you 20. So first class functions. Dynamic typed, I should change that to say dynamically typed. Of course, everything's dynamically typed. N could have been any particular data type. It could have been an integer, a vector, a string, etc. But there is, unlike languages such as Python, partial pastime type checking. Now, I'm actually very excited about this in Insitux, and it's not as advanced as it could be, but it's pretty good versus something like Python. So if I was to define a Python function, I could have done it in JavaScript as well, and I say add. No, how did I do this before? I swear. Well, actually, it doesn't matter, does it? If I just def f and it doesn't need to take anything, and then I return 1 plus 1. Okay, very, very simple. Of course, we all know if I call f and I print it, it's going to give me 2. That's fine. However, if I do hi plus 1, of course, it's going to complain because it wants 1 to be a string. So you're like, okay, turn that into a string. You get the error first, and then you have to go fix it. But if I don't use the function, so if I comment this out, it doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't give you any errors. Even though there is no possible way that this will ever work, it is not giving you an error for it. As opposed to Insitux, where if I go to the REPL directly, I define a function, I call it f, I try and add 1 to hi, and it immediately complains because it's sort of at the pass time, so statically, as it's being passed, it will look for as many type errors as it can. It could be more advanced. I have been a bit lazy with it, but it does catch most things. So it's saying here, hey, plus or fast plus actually, which it automatically converts to in the background. I probably should change it. Takes numeric arguments only, not strings. So f doesn't exist anymore, right? F isn't a thing because it was invalid, unlike Python where it'll just hide that from you. Even though they're both dynamic languages, I don't think that there's the excuse that, oh yeah, no, we don't do any type checking. It's not possible. It's not a good excuse. Immutable operations. So Insitux has a lot of built-in operations. In fact, I added one just today. Where is it? This one, the double equals. Don't really need to know what it is, but I'm adding every single day, essentially. Or at least every week I'm adding something. I'm not going to say every single day, otherwise that'd be what? 100 days? Well, let's have a look. Len of symbols. 160. Yeah, okay, fine. Every week. It was hyperbolic for me to say every day. It's just been a long weekend. I've had a lot of time to do things. Pretty much all of these, there's only, where is it? var, I don't even think it's in here. When you declare a variable, okay, with var or var plus or let, or I'm not saying let plus, bloody let exclamation mark, those are the only operations that can change variables. Otherwise, every single one of these, all of them are immutable. So that means it will not change the data that you give it. So unlike Python, where you do something like list, again, I'm really bashing Python today, aren't I? Don't give it a sorted list, that would defeat the purpose. Right, this list is out of order. I do list.sort and then I print list. Okay, so that has changed my list. We can see that has actually changed the list variable. And of course, there are so many ways that you could demonstrate this in Python, passing by reference, doing things mutably. Of course, there is sorted list, but it's just why in Python you've got to sort of remember, does this mutate my list? Does this mutate this? Everything in Insitux is immutable. So even if you do something like var list, let's just create a range, shall we? Okay, that's my list, and then I say append 11 to list. Okay, it's appended, I should have appended 10 to my list, but if I check list, it's still the same. Append gave me a copy, it gave me a new list. Now, unfortunately, unlike Clojure and ClojureScript and probably some other languages I can't think of, it's not a very performant operation. It really is just a copy of the list, but Insitux is not meant for performance. Sorry if that puts people off. I do have a roadmap in mind that I could make it more performant, but actually, as much as I love performant languages, it hasn't been that much of a pain point for me, actually. All the time that I've been using Insitux, it just the development's really fast, and it doesn't really matter how fast it runs. I suppose it's like Python in that respect, but at least Python has PyPy3 and stuff like that can speed it up. In the future, maybe. It's also difficult to make this fast because of the Roblox support. I have to polyfill a lot of things. I can't use eval, so I can't do any sort of transpilation. Whatever. That's immutable operations. Deep value equality. So that just essentially means you can have it check vectors. You can have it check deeply nested. Deeply nested. So it doesn't really matter whether that's the same or not. Oh no, I wanted to make that the same. Yeah, you can check through deeply nested values. So whether it's a dictionary or a vector or a string inside of a vector or whatever, it will deeply recurse, or whatever you want to call it, through your values to check whether they're equal or not. And that works anywhere that it needs to do equality checks. So that's quite helpful. It's not like, it's not like Python or JavaScript where it'll just either do a very shallow one, or you need to call upon heavier operations to do those sorts of equality checks, or any sort of manipulation. It's built in. If you do an equality check, it's going to do it perfectly, 100 levels deep, whatever it needs to do. Closures. So, my gosh, it's taken me about 5 attempts to get closures to properly work in Insitux. And I'll also talk about implicit currying, which maybe should be called implicit closures. But here we go. So you can make closures very, very easily. Here is a function that adds 10 to whatever parameter you give it. That is it. That is all you need to write. To do a function, make a function, a partially applied plus operation that already has 10, and then it's curried. So I could do here plus 10 as a function, and then give it another 10, and it'll give me 20. Of course, you could just write like that, but there is some power behind this. So let's say I do that, and then I can add 10, and then I can multiply it by 20, and then I can divide 100 by whatever that is, and there you go. So these are all tiny little partially applied closures. And closures, for those that don't know, means, and this doesn't actually happen in other languages, so I've kind of been weird with it, is say I had x which is 100, and then I created a closure like f, which is plus x, so that will add x onto whatever it is, and then I change x, but I use f, it's still adding 100 to it. Even though x has changed, it actually captured the value of x at this moment, which is what makes it a closure. But otherwise, they can be very simple. Like, what did I do recently? Just today I did... Oh boy, where is it? Why don't I just search for it? Hang on, I need to probably refresh the page. What was it called? 2. There we go, find 2 in a row. So here I've used 2 closures. Yeah, let's have a look at this, shall we? Here I've used 2 closures. This one, because the dot operation, I won't explain it, but typically it needs at least 2 arguments. So this implicitly becomes a closure. Same with this as well. Find typically needs 2 arguments. So it has become a closure as well. So if I was to say find val, that is now a very small anonymous function that will go through a list and find the first non-null one. So you can imagine how powerful this is, that you can just immediately create these very tiny little functions all over the place, like map this, blah blah blah, do this. It's very nice. It's very nice to play around with, especially here we go, matrix addition, subtraction, transposition. So here we've got 2 matrices, or however you say it, and I just say map this tiny function that maps plus over whatever it is, and it's very concise. I'm very excited about it. I love it. Keeping an eye on the time, right? So destructuring, just like any other language, right? You can, or any other language worth its salt. I know. Oh gosh, I shouldn't have used let. I should have used var. to show this off. So now we have A, we have B. It has destructured the list into another thing, and of course you can do deep destructuring or whatever you want to call it to destructure different values. It's the same in pretty much any language worth its salt you should know. Data piping is also in Clojure, which is the language that inspired Insitux quite heavily, but I take it to a bit more of an extreme because of these implicit closures. So for example here, generate random strong password is an example that I always wheel out. I create a little function which gives me random numbers between these two numbers. It gives me 4 categories of characters, and then I say with my data piping, times that by 4. So do that function 4 times. This in itself is a tiny little function that will just do whatever you give it 4 times. Flatten, because this is a pipe, it's sort of passing each thing into the next thing. Pass that into that, pass that that's been done 4 times into flatten, pass whatever has been flattened into shuffle, pass whatever has been shuffled into something that will map char code over it, so it'll turn all the numbers into characters, and then pass that into the thing that will concatenate it all into a string. So this sort of data piping, as I call it, I suppose, is very nice. It cleans up your code quite a lot as well, because, for example, this would be, you'd have to put find val, and then you'd have map blah, 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 and it gets a bit unreadable. So by using the pipes, it can be very nice. There we go, just a little bit of pipe usage there. In the real big programs I do, like for example this game of which is a game that I really enjoy playing. I think I've done piping there, so I've done it once there. I've done it here as well, so I'm saying start with this vector, map this function over it, then map this function over it, then map this function over it. It's just a lot nicer than going map, 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 map. There we go. That's for array access. It's helpful, but it is a different syntax than people can be used to. Call recur loop budgeting. So this is more for the Roblox integrators and such. You can't have infinite loops, right? So you can't have infinite calls. Actually, I'm not going to try and do the infinite recursion one because I set the budgets very high. So then when you try and do complex programs, it doesn't try and stop you. But for example, if I try and say loop that many times, it's going to say looped too many times. It's not going to crash. It's not going to, if I say while true, do something, it's going to say, whoa, you looped too many times. It's never going to get into any infinite loops, which actually is quite nice in programming in general, because how many times have you made an infinite loop? It's like, oh, I need to restart my program. Well, here you can set reasonable budgets and it'll just stop after a while. For Roblox integrators and Roblox games, that means your game will not crash just because somebody creates an infinite loop. People can't spam, like here, I've created 1,000 numbers, but you can set the limit on how many numbers you want them to create, etc. Explicit recur, that's very basic. If you want to do any recursion, there's an explicit recursion function, recursion operational statement or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Eval function, it has its own eval, so that can be quite nice to use. I mean, these are just the sundries, right? The little features in the end. Built-in tests, that's quite nice. It just makes sure that I haven't broken anything, that there haven't been any regressions each time I do an update. It's more for me than it is for you, but you can do tests true to see what kind of tests I'm doing. You'd have to look at the GitHub to see exactly what all these tests are. But my gosh, there are so many Clojure ones, like Clojure 1 all the way through to Clojure with, so many. Multi-line Node.js RAPL, we're getting really silly now. I mean, it's just, function. I press enter, it knows it isn't finished. Ta-da, there you go, that's multi-line, amazing. But it is quite nice actually, because I think I've turned it off now, but I had if you're on Linux or something like that, you can just do Control-Alt-T and then do IX or set up some other hotkey, and ta-da, you've got an Insitux RAPL. It's quite nice. And an MIT license, that's just nice, right? If you're trying to make a Roblox game or something like that, you don't need to open source everything. It's MIT. I have spent a lot of time talking, but let's quickly have a look at these projects then. So We got the npm package, the other npm package. That's fine. Sudo fast platform. I love talking about that. VS Code highlighter. So that's what's giving all the color to this. There is a syntax highlighter called Insitux syntax. It's updated regularly, etc., as it has to be. But first, not included, there's no homo iconicity, which sounds like something else, but what it means is there is no macros. You can't read the code once it has been written. There's no, if you're from Lisp, there's no quote or whatever that is. I've actually never used them in Lisp. I've never written a Lisp macro, so it didn't end up in Insitux, and under the hood it just works completely differently. It's not worth it. Anybody who knows will just go, oh. Anybody who doesn't, you're not missing anything, I suppose. Laziness. I kind of want to add this, but I've done it before in a previous language, and I know how difficult it can be. Not difficult, but just a faff, a time waste. Not a time. It's difficult. It's complicated, and it'll slow down the smaller operations. So I've sort of not done that at the moment. But it does mean, for example, if you just say, oh yeah, give me the first 5 of a range of 1,000 or 10,000, it really will generate 10,000 items before giving you the first 5, rather than just generating it on the fly, generating it lazily. I may think about it in the future. Depends what Insitux gets used for. There are no multi-arity functions. That just means you can't define 2 functions with the same name, but with different arities, with different number of parameters. It's sort of not needed in Insitux anyway. And there's no asynchronicity. Sorry, I really did try. The early versions, like the first few months of Insitux, it was asynchronous. You could do asynchronous I/O, networking, etc. But it just slowed Insitux down so much, and it was such a pain doing all the await async stuff, which actually I didn't mind it at the time, but then when I got rid of it, it felt so good, and everything was so much nicer, and there wasn't promises everywhere. Some other features, just again, very sundry stuff. Pretty much everything can be a function. So, for example, numbers can be functions. They're used to do the indexing. So, of course, that's just going to give me 5, isn't it? Yeah, you get me the 6th item of this list. Or you can use lists as functions as well. So here is a list. Does the list contain 5? No, it doesn't. If it did, it would return me 5. Same with dictionaries, of course. I'd hope you'd expect dictionaries to be functions as well. Give it 2, it gives me 3. Even booleans can be functions. So here true, and here, oh my gosh, type properly, false. It gives you 1, it gives you 2. It's not short-circuited, unlike if or something like that. But it's very nice. So that can lead to very small code in some places, or it can be very nice to use. I'm running out of time, really. Let's have a look at these projects as well. So Insitux is sort of the flagship project of Insitux now. It's become that. It was just a brain fart of mine. I thought, oh yeah, I could do that, and then I did it, and then I don't really touch it anymore. At least developing it, I develop apps for it. So essentially, with a little bit of Insitux, like for example, if we have a look at tic-tac-toe, this little bit of Insitux, one function called handler, you take your input, you can take what else? If I have a look at version, oh no, it's really simple. Anyway, you can make Discord bots and websites with the same code, all on this platform for free, hosted 24/7, etc. There's a whole video on it. I may link in the description. But yeah, it's really nice. You can add your own prefixes to the Insitux Discord bot, and it works really well. It's really nice, if I say so myself. Like here, I did a whole YouTube tutorial on writing a "Am I cool?" So it just takes who the person is. It gets the character code of the first letter, and then it checks whether it's odd. If it's odd, it says you're cool. If it's not, you're lame. And of course, mine is odd, isn't it? But yeah, so there's this whole thing going on. There's plenty of other projects you can do as well, like Mboard as well. You can make whole websites in Insitux. So here, this is all there is. It uses a reactive VDOM library, all written in Insitux, as I just showed. It could be a bit more complicated, and this is the whole. This is all in the browser. All of this is all that runs in the browser to make that, if I say so myself, quite nice message board. And in the background, what's it got in the background? I mean, the back end. Oh, sorry, I'm just clicking all over the place. Right. Source. That is all that's the back end. So you can make really small, nice little apps in Insitux. And I highly recommend that you join the Discord. It's where we talk, it's where we learn, it's where we play around with the Insitux bot. Lots of stuff going on. You can see what I do on GitHub, ask for help, browse through our scripts, etc. Come join us because it's really good. It's a really nice language. I hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry it's been so long. Take care.